Today I'd like to talk to you about some of the exciting things that are taking place in the Chemical and Life Science Engineering Department at VCU School of Engineering. I'd like to start off with a little bit of quiz about what the following things have in common. The first group is a group of pharmaceutical companies: Boehringer Ingelheim Pharmaceuticals, GlaxoSmithKline, Pfizer, and Merck. The second group are the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the Clinton Health Access Initiative, and the National Science Foundation. The third group is a group of universities: the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, the University of Washington, Florida State University, and the University of South Carolina. And the last group are a group of companies: Afton Chemicals, the Saudi Arabian Oil Cartel, Albemarle Chemicals, and ExxonMobil. And the question is, what do all these groups have in common? And the answer is pharmaceutical engineering at VCU. If you think about the pharmaceutical industry and some of the manufacturing advances that have occurred in the United States over the last several decades, probably one of the biggest innovations is the assembly line that was initiated by Henry Ford. And most major manufacturing operations employ this strategy. However, in the pharmaceutical industry, they use batch manufacturing, which is based on the round bottom flask on the left. And we've been working on some new technology that would more emulate an assembly line operation using continuous pharmaceutical processing, so that we really get to a situation where we're looking at processes such as the one on the right versus events in the round bottom flask. If you look at some of the current healthcare challenges that are occurring globally these days, and particularly in the United States, there's a significant shortage of life-saving drugs that's occurring in the marketplace right now, particularly in the area of oncology and cardiovascular drugs, as well as injectable drugs. This is a significant issue with both drug suppliers and the FDA, and there's a variety of reasons for these shortages. But right now there's over 200 drugs that are in short supply in the marketplace. One of the advantages for continuous pharmaceutical processing is that we can look at on-demand manufacturing capabilities of these drugs that are in short supply. One of the other issues is quality. I think everybody is aware of the fact that a large percentage of our drugs are being produced overseas now, which creates some regulatory constraints on the FDA with regards to auditing these facilities. And this has created issues in the area of counterfeit drugs, global suppliers that have contaminated products. A good example of that is the heparin scare that happened a few years ago, and just the routine batch-to-batch variability that's inherent with batch manufacturing. And new analytical capabilities and continuous manufacturing technology could actually address a lot of those issues. Lastly, the enforcement issue of international inspections, as I mentioned earlier, is a significant challenge to the FDA with major manufacturing facilities in India and China. And if we were able to have real-time access to production data that would come out of these continuous manufacturing operations, this would actually address this issue. So if you look at the dynamics that are occurring in the pharmaceutical industry these days, there's a paradigm shift that's taking place. It's been pretty dramatic. And all of the top 20 blockbuster drugs that are currently providing financial cash flow to the pharmaceutical companies to develop new drugs are all coming off a patent at approximately the same time between 2014 and 2016. And if you look at these, there's a wide range of classes of drugs, from any hypertensive drugs to cholesterol drugs, antibiotics, antivirals, and anti-inflammatory drugs. And other blockbuster drugs such as Plavix, Singular, Cymbalta, and Advair are all coming off a patent at about the same time. So if you think about the economics of this issue, for most patented drugs, the active ingredient component of a patented drug represents less than 10% of the selling price of the drug. The majority of that money goes back into the pharmaceutical companies to develop new products in their research and development groups. Once a drug goes generic, the economics flip and the active ingredient costs become approximately 70 to 80% of the selling price of the drug, which means the manufacturing cost associated with these drugs becomes a significant issue and a real opportunity to be able to reduce the cost of healthcare. So in order to achieve this, it's going to require a different paradigm platform to be able to address these issues. And it's going to require a lot of interdisciplinary interaction and skill sets that are going to be able to move this opportunity forward. So process engineering is kind of a key to that success. Secondly, we need to be able to develop analytical methods to be able to track product quality. And lastly, we need new chemical syntheses that can actually streamline these processes and reduce the cost. But all of these disciplines have to work interactively in order to be able to achieve success. So my research group at VCU is focused on streamlining pharmaceutical processes, and we're focused in two specific areas. One is in the area of catalysis. These are some examples of types of catalytic reactions that are routinely used in the pharmaceutical industry, and we're developing new catalyst systems that are much more efficient than the current ones that are being used, that can be adaptable to continuous operations. The other is flow chemistry, which I mentioned earlier, which is basically continuous chemical processing. And we're using these catalysts as well as new organic reactions and new heating sources to try and speed up chemical reactions to increase the throughput and increase the availability of these drugs. So I'd like to spend a few minutes and talk about a specific area of our research program that overlaps with a lot of key researchers in the country. We're leading a program called the Medicines for All project. And with that, we have several interactive skill sets from different universities that are participating in this. First of all, Tyler McQuaid from Florida State and Tim Jamieson from MIT are two of the leading synthetic chemists in the United States. And Tim and Tyler are part of this team that are looking at new synthetic methods to streamline drugs that are coming off a patent and are already off a patent. The Center for Process Analytical Capabilities at the University of Washington, headed up by Brian Marquardt and Mel Cote, are also developing new sensor technology that will allow us to measure product quality in real time. And lastly, my group at VCU takes these new chemistries, new analytical methods and bundles them into a uniform process that can effectively reduce the cost of healthcare. Now, our first target is a drug called Nevirapine, and Nevirapine is one of the world's most widely prescribed AIDS drugs. The current cost is about $250 a kilo for that drug, and our goal has been to reduce the cost to less than $50 a kilo, basically a 75% reduction in the cost of this drug. And we're using an entirely different strategy. We're using very simple starting materials that are commodity-based raw materials that we can use, and in a continuous manufacturing platform that you see here, convert those simple raw materials into a very complex molecule on the right, which is Nevirapine. Now, if you look at the strategy, the general overall strategy that we're using, it's based on a hypothesis that applying new chemical principles and technology to these problems will enable us to identify low-cost routes into these critical active pharmaceutical ingredients to address global healthcare issues. Now, Nevirapine has been growing fairly rapidly since 2009 and is up to approximately 1,000 metric tons a year of product, and that treats only about 20% of the infected population. The other interesting note here is that although it's not widely publicized, the rate of infection of HIV globally is increasing at a rate of 14% a year. So this number is expected to continue to increase. Now, the average income of a individual in South Africa is about $1,000 a year. So the idea behind this is to reduce the cost of these drugs so that we can increase the availability of the drugs and purchase more drugs with the same amount of funds that are available for acquisition. This is actually the drug cocktail for the treatment of AIDS, and those are the three molecules, and as you can see, the Nevirapine is a major component to that mixture. Now, the impact to society, we feel, will be significant because these third world countries are going to have a significant challenge in the future. And if we can build a new platform for accessing these drugs using some new technology, this will actually help to address this healthcare issue. The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation has provided funding to my research group at the School of Engineering in the amount of $4.4 million. This is an 18-month project, and my team from MIT, Florida State, and University of Washington are all co-PIs on the project, and VCU is the lead PI. The next thing I wanted to talk about was how the interaction that we have between industry and academia has helped us to mold our program. And this is an image of the IQ Consortium's Board of Directors. The IQ Consortium is a spin-off from the Pharma organization, which is a lobbying group, and the IQ Consortium is a loose alignment of the different major pharmaceutical companies. And what they do is they share technologies in pre-competitive space. And a little over a year ago, they asked me to speak on flow chemistry as part of the active pharmaceutical ingredients activities. And what came out of that was a project that I had been working on for some time. And it's a drug called Artemisinine, which is probably the gold standard for treating malaria. Artemisinine is made from a natural product, the sweet wormwood, which is produced in the Far East. And that the problem with it is that because it's a natural product, it's subject to availability based on weather. And whenever they have a drought and they can't supply the market, the price of the drug goes up, and there becomes an outbreak of malaria. And this is one of the major focuses of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, to try and address this issue of malaria in these emerging economies. So Artemisinine is a target that we've been looking at, and after I gave my talk to the IQ Consortium, we were approached by the folks at Merck. And Matt Trupo and L.C. Campo at Merck are working with us to develop a streamlined process that will reduce the cost of Artemisinine and also make it more available and stable in the marketplace. So this work that we were doing with the Merck folks is also in the area of catalysis, and we've developed several unique catalyst systems that are used routinely in the pharmaceutical industry. So about 2 years ago, I was approached by a consortium from Pfizer, Boehringer Ingelheim, and GlaxoSmithKline to develop an academic team that would interface with the pharmaceutical industry, these pharmaceutical partners in particular, to develop new catalysts that could be used to reduce the cost of pharmaceuticals. And I was fortunate to be able to work with two other very prominent individuals and academicians in catalysis, Gary Molander at the University of Pennsylvania and Scott Miller at Yale. And the three of us have been working on different areas of catalysis. And this is something that we've been pretty successful in the last several months, and we expect to have a lot of new innovations coming out of this group. What was interesting was Dean Boyan, Barbara Boyan, who joined the School of Engineering approximately about a year and a half ago, had heard about what we were doing with catalysis, and she approached me and she said we should actually start to work on developing an industry university cooperative research center, referred to as an IUCRC, that would be funded through the National Science Foundation. At the time, I told Dean Boyne that I was pretty involved with a lot of these other activities, and I was going to have a very hard time putting together a proposal to do just this. The next day, I got a phone call from a colleague of mine at the University of South Carolina, J.R. Regalbuto, who has an amazing catalysis group at the University of South Carolina, and called me to find out whether I would be interested in working with him to develop an IUCRC Center for Rational Catalyst Synthesis. So I saw this as a sign, and JR and I met with the NSF on June of this year and received a planning grant from NSF. We've submitted the proposal, and our expectation is that the proposal will be approved by the NSF in early 2015. Now, if you look at impacts, why catalysis is so important, approximately 90% of all products that are produced globally and 80% of the added value in the chemical industry comes from catalysis. And 20 to 35% of the world's GDP is dependent directly upon or indirectly upon catalysis. And if you add all that up, it's basically, and compare it to countries, it would rival the EU and USA for economic impact. So this is a very important element of our economy. And the NSF has spent, and the Department of Energy have spent a significant amount of effort in cultivating this technology through grants between the two organizations. Now, this center will be relatively unique in that a lot of past centers that have been funded have been based on catalyst design. And that there are 3 centers currently in the United States. There's one at the University of Delaware, one at Northwestern, and a third one at LSU, all of which are focused on catalyst design. This catalyst center will be different in that we're looking at the synthesis of catalysts and using new technologies to be able to translate new innovations in catalysis directly into manufacturing. The other interesting element is that the Northwestern-Argonne relationship will be ending shortly, and that catalysis center will end because the Argonne labs are being decommissioned. And LSU is actually losing their position, so we will be one of 2 national catalyst centers recognized by NSF between us and the University of Delaware, and we'll have complementary skills between those 2 centers. Now, here's a list of the membership that we've been able to attain as part of the Catalysis Center, and you can see these are all major chemical, petroleum, and pharmaceutical companies who will be part of this center, and it will give our students the opportunity to have interaction with these industry leaders, hopefully leading to jobs for these students and new innovations for the universities and our industrial partners. And lastly, I'd like to comment on this pharmaceutical engineering program because it's not just my research group. There's a very active program going on throughout the School of Engineering in the areas of inhalation drug therapy with Darren Chen and Worth Longest, and in drug delivery systems from Hu Yang, Su-Jen Wen, and Dean Boyne. So I believe that we're uniquely poised to be able to successfully become a leader in this area and distinguish ourselves amongst our academic partners. So that concludes my talk, and I was very happy that you had an opportunity to hear more about the Chemical and Life Science Engineering program, School of Engineering, and the Pharmaceutical Engineering program at VCU. Thank you.